We're about to introduce David and Eric and talk about OpenROV.
Can you guys hear? Can you hear me? Does your mic work?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right. Should we take a seat? No, we should.
No.
So it's a real honor to be here, and it's also really intimidating to come right after Chris Anderson because he is one of our big heroes. We've kind of been copying him for as many years as we can remember. But what we are not going to do, because Chris did such a good job, is tell you about all the technical changes that are happening. I mean, I think Chris did a fantastic job of giving you guys an overview of some of the macro trends that are going on. So instead, we're going to focus on a little bit different aspect of the maker movement. And to start, I want to quote one of the great modern philosophers of the 21st century, Kanye West. We're going to steer clear of opportunities, and we're going to focus on dreams. Because I think that's what Maker Faire is all about. I think this place is just a dream factory. And for Eric and I, that is especially true. I've been coming here for 5 years, and it always blows me away to see the people's faces and what they're doing and what they're building and the dreams that they have for their projects. But of all the stories I've heard at Maker Faire, none of them has been able to top one of the first ones that I heard from Eric. So we'll start with that.
Well, many good stories start with treasure.
Yep.
And ours was no exception. You guys probably largely, for the most part, know what the story is about. But generally, we heard about this lost gold. During the gold rush, there was a robbery, and these guys who were running away from the sheriffs dished the gold in a bottomless, water-filled pit, and no one has found it to this day. It was in this cave. And so we designed this ROV to go explore this bottomless pit. And
so this was Eric's dream. He said, I want to build this underwater robot, and then he showed me this one.
So this is what we had at the time, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it didn't work.
Yeah.
So we were interested in this. David and I started talking about this more and more. David wouldn't leave me alone. He kept on typing me emails, hey, what are we working on? And we'd start talking about things. You suggested, hey, let's make a website and tell other people what's going on. That ended up being great. We created OpenROV.com, and the idea of this is a community. And what we could do is share our project with the rest of the world. People were interested in this, and they could contribute to the design of what we were doing. So people on the forums would ask us questions about how we're doing things and make suggestions. And eventually we went back to the cave. And so now, this is almost a year later after we initially heard this story. And we went up to this cave. Here's this bottom-filled pit. We had the computer monitors set up. We brought all of our friends, and we put the ROV in the water. And then we started a Kickstarter project. We tried finding this gold, and we never found anything. We didn't even find the end of the cave. It could still be down there, but we got enough attention that it blew up. People wanted to be a part of this, and we said, well, why don't we sell kits so you can build your own ROV and explore your own thing, because the Hull City Cave is just one little adventure. There's so many everywhere. And Kickstarter was great. We had an awesome time. It was successful. We got them everywhere.
And 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, $100,000 on Kickstarter was actually a lot of money. I know now it's kind of chump change and everyone does that, but back then it was a lot of money. But then we actually had to build these things, which I think a lot of you were here for Chris's talk, but this was Maker Movement 1.0, where we were still in the garage and we actually had to figure out, okay, how do we actually assemble all these things? How do we get them out to people? We didn't have the luxury of having 5 kids like Chris did, where he could put them to work packing kits. It was pretty much me and Eric.
It's hard to go from making something on your own to building it for a lot of people.
Exactly. But that's what we did. We manufactured that first amount in the garage, and we were able to ship them to people all around the world. And that's what we've done for the past 2.5 years. And we are continually blown away. I mean, it's a day or a week doesn't go by where we don't hear a story from someone who has it's, if not better, at least as good as our first underwater cave story. And so these things have been to Florida, they've been to cenotes in Mexico, they've been to Antarctica, they've been to the Caribbean, they've been in, I think, almost every single ocean. Maybe not the Indian Ocean yet, I'm not sure. But the most important thing is they've gone all around the world. So what started as this conversation between Eric and I mean, I can remember it vividly, saying, wouldn't it be cool if there were thousands of these underwater robots around the world, and people could log online and control them. It was a conversation, it was a dream that we had together, and it's turned into a reality. I mean, it's become this thing. We have shipped 1,500 of these robots in the past 2 years, and most importantly, we've met all of these incredible people who've been a part of this journey with us. I was quick show of hands. How many of you here have an OpenROV or have built one? All right, so a handful. That's awesome. Everybody else should get one. And it's been interesting from our perspective because we've been at Maker Faire during this transition, what Chris talked to Maker Movement 1.0 to Maker Movement 2.0, and it's been amazing to come to the fair this year and to see all of our friends who, 5 years ago just had similar dreams to Eric and ours, that they had this project that they wanted to make, and now they have booths, and they have companies, and they have products, and they're making new stuff. It's an extraordinary thing to go through, to see all of your friends kind of grow up in this same exciting environment that you have. And one of the big trends we've seen is people following their curiosity, people taking these tools, these new digital fabrication tools, and actually moving out into the world to explore. But our dream was, in particular, our dream was for underwater exploration, and that's not a new dream. Humans have been looking out across the waves and wondering what's going on beneath the surface, I'm assuming for eternity. But it is actually a very, very recent development that humans have actually started to go below the surface and understand how most of our planet actually works. And so I wanted to give you guys a brief history of ocean exploration because a lot of people don't realize just how recent this development is. So I'm going to start with the diving bell. This was some of the, supposedly Alexander the Great had a diving bell and he used that to explore the ocean. The history is a little unclear about who actually had the first diving bell and when it was actually used. But those are the first kind of stories that we have of people actually venturing below the surface. And then in the 1700s, you see weird contraptions like this diving chamber. In 1776, we start to get these people who are building what almost seems like submarines, but they were self-propelled and they are starting to take shape. People are understanding how the pressure worked, things like that. The Nautilus was a famous submarine that was at the 18th century or 1800s, and then might look familiar to you guys. These suits, so those kind of big bronze heads that people would put on and pump air down. So that was about 1830. The 1860 is this is just one of the submarines that came around at that time. This is the Actinio. The story of the Actinio, too, is really fantastic. Andrew in the audience has written a lot about it, but this was a Spanish guy who crowdfunded the support for this submarine. And it's a really wonderful story. You should Google it and read the whole thing. But this is also the time that submarines were starting to be used for military use. This is one of my favorites. This is a crazy maker named Simon Lake who built the Argonaut Jr., which is a wooden submarine that would crawl along the bottom of the lake or the ocean. This is one of my favorites because a friend of ours actually rebuilt this in his backyard in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and brought it to a Maker Faire in Oklahoma, which I thought was...
I was going to say, a lot of this looks like stuff you'd see at a Maker Faire, right?
Exactly.
This is built by people like all of us.
I mean, the history of ocean exploration really is a maker story. It's also a military story, but that's a separate one that we don't talk about as much. So, in 1934, Barton and Beebe, they built the Bathysphere, and they went down to 1,000 meters. So this is kind of when we start to get into the deeper depths, but this is what they were working with. And Jacques Cousteau co-invented the Aqua lung in 1942. So this is only 75 years that we've actually had modern scuba diving. It's a really, really brief history we're talking about. The Trieste is another famous submarine. It's basically a bath escape. That little ball, just like BB, is what they used to go down to the Marianas Trench, and they were the first two people to do that. And then in the 1950s and 60s, they were doing research, but then we really don't see ROVs, which are remotely operated vehicles. This is the first time we're actually sending robots down to do work, to explore underneath the ocean. So even that is something that's less than 50 years old. And then there's all these other crazy things that people have invented. This is the newt suit, which is
the newt
this.
suit.
Yeah, I love this one.
Yeah.
And this is, but this was invented in the 80s. But there's more modern versions of this. But there's still something that only billionaires can really afford. And then it wasn't until the mid 80s that we saw the first AUVs, so the first autonomous underwater vehicles. And you can see the size of some of these vehicles and and what they were used for. And there's been, a few innovations as far as autonomous underwater vehicles. The glider is one of my favorites, the way it uses buoyancy for propulsion. But it's something that's very, very, very new. And 2012 is the year that I really want to talk about, because that is the year that James Cameron went to the bottom of the Marianas Trench with his deep sea Challenger. But it's also the year that Eric created the OpenROV. And so for me,
an event, yeah.
This is the turning point for ocean exploration in our kind of idealistic minds. But I think that's worth pointing out, because Jim's Cameron project cost, I think, close to $100 million. I think at least $60 million to actually pull that off. And ours cost less than $600. So two totally different things. And I think the difference of those is really important. And this is a long quote, and I apologize, but I think it's important. A project is sustainable if it is cheap enough to be the first of a series, continuing indefinitely into the future. A project is unsustainable if it is so expensive that it cannot be repeated without major political battles. A sustainable project marks the beginning of a new era.
A new era.
And I think that is what we are at the beginning of. And I think the things you're seeing at Maker Faire are all signs of what that new era might look like. So what's next?
So what's next? The new era, right? I mean, it's really interesting because, you guys have been to Maker Faire before, or if this is your first time, you can see that what's out there is the beginning of a lot of new things. Some of them are silly projects. Some of them are very important projects, like those drivable cupcakes. But the important thing is that people are trying things and they have access to try things. It doesn't require a government's funding anymore to do something amazing. And we at OpenROV have kind of found ourselves in this really wonderful place where we have the kind of people at OpenROV and the kind of creativity to kind of dream about what could happen in the future and try making those dreams happen. David and I have talked about this a lot, and we realized after really thinking about it a lot that there are three big things that contribute to something just taking off, to something becoming an era. Cheap components is one, and we've talked about this, like Chris was mentioning, access to these computers that are really powerful but still low cost. Open standards, like everyone is building on top of an Arduino, or everyone is using this, ArduPilot, or a lot of the hardware standards. And the last thing, perhaps even the most important thing, is connected enthusiasm. It's Maker Faire. It's all these things where people are coming together and sharing their ideas. If you can put these three things in a cauldron and stir the pot for a bit, you are going to get magic. And for us, the thing that this all adds up to is what we're trying to create, which is open exploration, connected exploration that we are all doing together. So connected exploration is what David and I have been talking about for a bit because we believe it's so important. If you can get everyone to participate in a journey together, amazing things will happen. This is the beginning of, I think, a new era where technology is going to allow us to do new things. This slide is from cenote, an underwater cave in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And you can see, if you look really closely, there's two little red dots. You guys see those red dots? So those are laser beams that are coming out of the robot. They're just little like laser pointer laser dots. But and they're looking right now, by the way, at ancient Mayan pottery that an OpenROV user flew the ROV into the cenote and looked at. But the cool thing is, and you can't see it on this screen, but a member of our community, Joachim Carlson, who's actually here at Maker Faire.
Over there.
Oh, he's in the audience. There he is over there. He wrote a computer vision program that measures the number of pixels between those little red dots and tells you how far away the object is. So all of a sudden now, just with an off-the-shelf webcam and two laser dots, you can get range finding, laser range finding. And we're doing it with off-the-shelf parts. That's because we're connecting. And Joachim, that is an incredible program. I think you really have blown us all away with it. And it's just the beginning. While we're talking about stuff you've done, I hope I'm not embarrassing too much. How many of you guys, by show of hands, have seen the new, computer or virtual
Rift.
reality goggles, Oculus Rift? You guys have heard of Oculus Rift? Almost everyone's raising their hand. It's, this thing you can look around in another world. Imagine if it wasn't just a virtual world, if that was real life. I know you've worked on a plugin also that has done that. There's a plugin for OpenROV that we're working on right now where you can literally see what the robot is seeing using an Oculus Rift. You're no longer, this is a better field of view than you get with a diving mask. Imagine a group of people sitting all wearing these things as an ROV connected through the internet on some other part of the world is flying through an underwater canyon, and you can really be there. You can participate. This is a type of exploration that has never been done before. It's not someone else going and telling us what they did. It's us being a part of it together. And this is one of the ones I'm most excited about.
I know, I can see from the picture.
Okay, so really remote control. Right now, you can take an OpenROV or a drone or any of these types of kind of connected exploration tools, any of these remote control things, and with a RC link or connecting to your computer, you can drive it around and there it is. You can see it, it's close to you, but hold the phone. What if you don't have to do that? We live in the age of the internet, and especially with ROVs where they move slow, they're not going to crash on people. What if you could actually log in from another part of the world? This is an image we just took last weekend at Lake Tahoe, where we had a bunch of computer monitors set up. We invited a whole bunch of our people out there. Numerous people in the audience were there for this. We set up this mission control, and we had a buoy, a wireless buoy, that we rode way out into the middle of Lake Tahoe. And we were able to deploy the robot, which was attached to this wireless buoy, and everyone came back to mission control in this cabin. So we were out of the wind in this nice big area with lots of monitors, and everyone was watching. You could drink a hot cocoa and drive this robot around as it's somewhere else in the lake. And what we did beyond that is, because the cabin had an internet connection, we allowed people from around the world to log in and see the dive as it was happening. So now this means that you could have a kid who lives in the Canary Islands who's 12 years old and has a robot. He could put it in the water, and a marine archaeologist who lives in the United States could log in and have him look at some things, and a biologist who lives in, Taiwan could make comments. When you bring people together, there's amazing stuff you can do. This is just the beginning of a new era of exploration where everyone is working on it together. Connected exploration is the future. And it's not just going to be ROVs. By a show of hands, how many of you guys have heard of AUVs? It stands for Autonomous Underwater Vehicle. Not too many. I'm guessing maybe a quarter of the audience. But as you see, devices are getting smarter and smarter. RC airplanes and helicopters have been around for a long time, but what has created this whole new infusion of interest is because of the computer systems on board. Charles is working at NASA Langley right now in the Autonomous Systems group, and he's been working with a lot of autonomous vehicles, and he and I have been talking a lot this week about what you can do when you make a robot smart enough to navigate on your own. Think of riding a bicycle. When you're riding a bicycle, you're steering the handlebars in two ways. One is you're turning left on one street and right on another street. But at the same time, you're also doing this kind of twitchy motion to keep the bike upright, and that's really hard to do if you're a robot. If you're controlling a robot. But if you can make a robot smart enough where you just give it higher level control, like go survey that area and come back to me and tell me what you found, that has profound impact on how you can explore. You could have multiple AUVs, autonomous underwater vehicles, around underwater, and you could have them scope it out for you. I think that AUVs are going to be kind of like the future that quadcopters made for aerial vehicles.
And
AUVs.
these exist now.
They already
they're
exist.
Just hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
But that's the problem.
And so the real innovation here is that these things are going to get cheaper for all the reasons that Chris mentioned. The computing is just getting cheaper, and makers are going to figure out how to do it.
You're absolutely right. So this is called the coconut pie, right?
Yeah, so it's a Raspberry Pi, exactly.
And this is an AUV that someone made, and I think there's a tremendous future in this, and it's a lot of fun too. If you guys look into it, the things that these are doing are amazing, but it has never been accessible to everyday people. And if we, as a community, can make that happen, it's going to be incredible. It's really going to be incredible. So where is this all going, though? What all these people are able to explore all these things. What is it that's all summing up to? How are we going to share that?
So what our story, it's great that we built the robot, but the bigger thing, the more important kind of secret that we think went into that story being such a success is that we got so many people involved. And so we've we've been calling it Do It Together. So instead of DIY, DIT. And this just doesn't apply to just making stuff. This actually applies to getting out and exploring and understanding our world. And it's something that we hope you guys will all join us, because it really is a lot of fun. Yeah.
So to sum it up, you said this quote this morning. I thought this was really great.
Right. So to stay on the theme of dreams, Yoko Ono's famous quote, "A dream you dream alone is just a dream, but one you dream together is a reality." And the last 3 years for us have been an extraordinary ride, and we hope that all of you will be a part of the next 3 years.
We're going to do this together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. We have 4 minutes, so that's maybe like just a few questions.
Yeah, we've got a microphone right in the middle. If anybody has questions, feel free to step right up.
Nobody?
Nice.
He's coming, I think, or else he's leaving.
It's kind of nice having the microphone in the middle, because I think,
Yeah.
How well does Wi-Fi travel underwater?
That is an excellent question. So a lot of people ask us why our ROVs are tethered. And the reason that they're tethered is because it travels through water almost not at all, on the order of about 10 centimeters. We've actually measured it. So if you want live video, you just have to have a tether going down to the ROV. But that's also kind of nice because, if you're a pilot like me, you tend to get stuck a lot.
So I do this all the time, and I feel so bad. Is sometimes we go through an entire presentation, and we don't even say what the robot does. So it drives underwater and sends live video through a tether that you can see on a screen, and you can drive and control from the top. So it's really kind of an adventure.
It's a lot like playing a video game, but underwater. As we get autonomous vehicles, we hope that we'll be able to, you send it and do something that's completely wireless, and it comes back to the surface.
Good question.
Yeah.
Hello, I just wanted to ask about the really remote control. Is that the thing that you went to Lake Tahoe, right? You said that across the internet you could do something. I'm not an expert, but isn't it a possibility that someone could hack into it?
Well, yeah, although, we're not,
Is that a problem? I don't know.
Someone on the surface can always control, who has access and who doesn't. But for the most part, I picture it kind of like, what I always think of is World of Warcraft. I have a lot of friends who play this all the time, right? And there's different servers they hang out on. You can manage who's on a server and who's not, but the big idea is that you can get people to come together. In Tahoe, we were doing two things. We had a long-range wireless system, which allowed us to go from somewhere way out on the water back to shore, and then we had an internet control thing, which allowed the shore to communicate to the rest of the world through the internet. And I think it's going to be great when you get as many people participating as possible. Some people are watching while others are driving. There could be a queue. And this is just the beginning of that and figuring out how it works. These are good questions.
So I'm just curious about the coolest things you've actually found with your...
Oh, we shouldn't tell them about the big Leviathan. That's too scary.
Yeah. The coolest thing that we've
I liked, what I saw? I was watching Darcy's video the other day. There's this guy. Have any of you guys ever heard of hexactinella? Of course you have, Dr. Taylor. Glass sponges. Okay, so there was this guy in Canada, Darcy. He's a member of our community. There is this species of sponge that we thought was extinct since the Jurassic period as an ecosystem. And only recently, basically in the 2000s, did they start realizing, oh my God, these things we thought were alive during the dinosaurs are still around as an ecosystem. And a guy in Vancouver, Canada, flew an ROV down and watched this entire ecosystem. He was able to see something that hardly any human eyes have ever seen before. It's amazing the kind of things that are out there, and we just can't see them. Sometimes just meters below the surface. We've seen shipwrecks, and we've flown with pods of melon-headed whales. We've flown ROVs under the ice in Antarctica. They have been on every continent, and this is just the beginning. Almost daily now we're seeing footage that's really amazing.
Hi, I got a question about a technical question about the different motors. Have you guys experimented with any of the brushless motors on your systems? And if possible, is there a way to waterproof them?
So we're already using brushless motors on our robots. Brushless motors, for those of you guys who don't know, a lot of motors work by having a little conductor that's called a brush that pushes against part of the motor, and as it spins, it makes a contact. And brushless motors work by turning electromagnets on and off in a sequence. That's what we use, and they work great in water, as long as you can keep them from corroding and electrical shorting from happening. And that's actually really easy to do. So we already use those.